I'm one of the college students who gets to hang out here a good bit. I know a lot of y'all weren't here last time I was here, but I got to talk back in the summer. So I'm really excited to get to be back here and give Dion a break for a week so he doesn't have to do it twice in a day. And so before we jump in, let's just do a quick recap about what you guys talked about last week. And so does anybody remember what we talked about last week? All right, I'm going to start calling people. All right, Logan, what did we talk about last week?
I want to break my hand. Hold up. Was last week the week that Xander talked?
I don't know who talked.
I know.
Okay.
Trinity.
Trinity? No, I don't think so.
Proud unbelief.
Yes, proud unbelief. Somebody tell me something about proud unbelief. Just throw something out that you remember. All right, Richard?
Believing that we know what we believe more than God.
Okay, good. Anything else? All right, you're going to call one more person. Who is... Okay, well, we'll just move on because you guys don't remember a whole lot. So I'll tell you what we talked about last week. We talked about proud unbelief. We talked about how pride kind of keeps us back from God, right? And we talked a little bit about how Satan, who used to be an angel, thought that he could do God's job better than God could. And so he rebels against God and ultimately gets punished and kicked out of heaven. And you talked about how that was the first sin and how that was kind of how sin came into being. So today, we're going to talk about how we came to be sinners and how sin actually entered the earth. All right, and so, because I think it's really easy for us to look around and see that our world's broken and it's not really working the way it's supposed to be. Like, we don't even have to leave our own house and the relationships with our family members to see that things aren't really going as they should. Like, who in here has a sibling? Just raise your hand. All right, so most of us. So, another question, who in here has ever fought with their sibling?
Oh.
All right, if you raised your hand for the first question and didn't raise your hand for the second question, you just lied to everybody in here. But we'll forgive you for that. I think most of y'all were honest, so that's good. But, it's really easy to see how sin affects our relationships when you don't even have to leave our own house. Like, I'm a twin, and my twin brother is the only brother that I have. And so growing up, we always had the same friends, we were always into the same things, we were around each other a lot. And that meant we butt heads a lot. We just fought a lot when we were younger. And while some of that may just be being kids, a lot of that you have to look at and say, that's kind of messed up. Because, he's my brother, and we love each other. And that should be a relationship that I feel safe in. But there's been times where I said things to my brother that I really shouldn't have said to him, and that hurt him. And then there's other times where he said things to me that really hurt me and that he shouldn't have said to me. And so even though we're brothers and we love each other, we still find a way to hurt each other. Also with our parents. I'm not even going to ask this question because I know everybody in here has disrespected their parents at some point. We can see that in our relationship with our parents. That even though they love us and they want the best for us, and even though they're trying to help us to succeed and protect us, we still always think the rules are really lame and we don't want to do what they tell us to do. And even when we do what they tell us to do, we don't really do it with a grateful heart. And so even though sin's really evident in our relationships with our family, and just in a small way where it only affects people in our family, we can also see sin in a large way when we see like war or disease or something where it affects people on a bigger scale. And so since it's pretty easy to see how sin affects our relationships and who we are, let's turn to Genesis chapter 3 if you have a Bible. We're going to see what God says about how sin came into our world. So who can tell me what has happened up to this point in Genesis chapter 3? What happened in Genesis 1 and 2? All right, somebody. All right?
He made things.
All right, he made things. What did he make? Name some stuff out.
A little bit of everything.
Okay, you want to be more specific?
Everything.
Okay, well that's true, but give me something he made.
The sky.
Okay, the sky. Do you have your hand up over here? You getting? Somebody has their hand up over
Oh, it was me.
here. Okay. Sure.
Okay.
Silas.
Yeah.
Animals.
Animals. Alright, you made animals. Richard.
Planets.
Planet? Other red shirts?
Water.
Water? I already called it.
Humans.
What was it? Humans. All right, that's what I was looking for. All right, so he makes everything that we see in Genesis chapter 1, and when he gets to humans, he does it a little bit differently, doesn't he? Like, instead of just saying it was good, he makes Adam and Eve and says that it was very good. And so he basically, in Genesis, I think, or chapter 1 or chapter 2, I can't remember, it says that he made us in his own image. And so that means that humans are basically God's favorite part of everything that he's created. Like, we look more like God than anything else in creation. And so that's kind of how he starts stuff out, and that's how we get up to the point in Genesis chapter 3. At this point, he basically told Adam and Eve, like, you guys have everything. I'm going to put you in this place called the Garden of Eden, and you guys can do anything you want, but you can't do one thing. What was that one thing? All right, right, eat from the tree. He said you can do anything, but don't eat the fruit from this one tree in the middle of the garden. It's the only thing you can't do. You can do anything else you want. So this is where we pick up. So we'll start in verse 1 of chapter 3. The serpent was the shrewdest, or you can say sneakiest. I like sneaky in this verse. The serpent was the sneakiest of all the wild animals the Lord God had made. And one day he asked the woman, did God really say that you must not eat the fruit from any of the trees in the garden? So we know that's really not what God said. So he's kind of just trying to get Eve to question what God told her to do. All right, so let's keep going. Verse 2. So Eve replies, of course we may eat the fruit from the trees in the garden, the woman replied. It's only the fruit from the tree in the middle of the garden that we are not allowed to eat. God said you must not eat it or even touch it, and if you do, you will die. And you won't die, the serpent replied to the woman. God knows that your eyes will be opened as soon as you eat it, and you will be like God, knowing both good and evil. And so this is where we see Satan kind of start to say something that's maybe a little bit true, but not completely true, right? Is that God said, well, what did God say if they eat from the tree? He said that they're going to die. And so Satan kind of lies to him, and he's like, you won't really die, you're just going to be more like God. So when I thought of this, I thought about something that was kind of funny in my childhood. One thing that my parents always got onto me on when I was a kid was running out in the middle of the road. Anybody else have that? Like, for some reason, when we're kids, we just like are drawn to dangerous places or something, so we just want to run out where we're not supposed to. But when I was a kid, I always got so mad at my parents when they did this, because I always wanted to play out in the street for some reason. I don't know what that is, or go beyond the boundaries of my front yard. And I just thought they were trying to ruin my fun and hold me back from doing something I wanted to do. Right? Anybody else? No, I'm still here. Yeah, and so while I looked at it that way, now I can look back and see my parents were trying to protect me. Is that they're sitting here going like, hey, we love you and we really don't want you to get flattened by a pickup truck, so please don't run out there. And for some reason, like, every kid, it's really funny, you can like drive in a neighborhood and you always see a kid just take off towards the road, and like every adult in the front yard like tries to tackle the kid before he gets there or something, so he doesn't get out. And so, like, it's kind of the same thing here, is that God actually knows what's going to happen if they eat from the tree. Like, he knows they're going to die. He knows the relationship between them and God's going to be kind of messed up, right? And so he's telling them, like, you know, I love you. I don't want you to do this. Like, I'm your authority, so don't eat from this tree. And Satan's kind of saying, actually, God's kind of holding something back from you. Like Satan's saying, like, you're actually going to be better if you eat this, and God just don't want you to eat it because he don't want you to be better. And so that's kind of how that's kind of the first lie Satan gives us. And so let's just keep reading. I think we're in verse 6. The woman was convinced. She saw that the tree was beautiful and its fruit looked delicious, and she wanted the wisdom it would give her. So she took some of the fruit and ate it. And then she gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it too. At that moment, their eyes were opened, and they suddenly felt shame at their nakedness. So they sewed fig leaves together to cover themselves. When the cool evening breezes were blowing, the man and his wife heard the Lord God walking in the garden. So they hid from the Lord God among the trees. And then the Lord God called to the man, "Where are you?" And he replied, "I heard you walking in the garden, so I hid. I was afraid because I was naked." "Who told you that you were naked?" the Lord God asked. "Have you eaten from the tree whose fruit I commanded you not to eat?" And the man replied, "It was the woman you gave me the fruit, and I ate it." And then the Lord God asked the woman, what have you done? And she says, the serpent deceived me. That's why I ate it. And so here's where we see that we're exactly like Adam and Eve. Is that the first thing that they do after they mess up is they try to fix the problem themselves and they try to hide it, right? First thing they do is they realize they're naked, so they get fig leaves, right? And so they try to cover it up like God's not going to notice the next time they see him or something, if we don't really know what they were thinking. And so they try to hide the problem, and then the next time God's coming through the garden looking for them, they're actually hiding from God because they know they messed up, right? So I do this all the time. When I was a kid, whenever I messed up, whenever I did something that my parents were mad at me for, like I didn't want to talk to my parents for a long time. And it wasn't because I was mad at my parents, it was because I was ashamed. Because I didn't want to talk to them because I knew I had messed up, right? And so this is the same thing, is that we hide from God all the time when we sin. And so this is basically how sin came into our world, is that this was the first act of disobedience. And while we see that God actually punishes Adam and Eve, like he kicks them out of the garden, and the garden was like the perfect place to be. You actually got to walk around with God, which is pretty cool if you think about it. Like they get punished, but you also hear that God's really gracious with them, and that he sends Jesus later in the Bible. We're not going to talk too much about that today. But here's the thing. There's a reason why pursuing God, one of our little mission statements here, is so tough. And that's because of this. It's because we disobey God and we actually feel the need to run away from him and isolate ourselves from him, when that shouldn't be the case. So if you guys don't hear anything that I say this morning at all, just take this. Like, this is not something where we can look and be like, man, Adam and Eve, we can't stand y'all. Like, you guys screwed it up for us. Like, it was going to be perfect and you had to eat the fruit you weren't supposed to eat, and now you ruined it for everybody else. Like, when we're looking at Adam and Eve here, we're essentially looking into a mirror. Like, this is us and this is what we've done in our lives. When I read the part about when God's walking through the garden looking for Adam and Eve, and they're basically hiding from him, like, it's pretty ridiculous, because you know God already knows the answer to the questions he's asking, right? He's just kind of asking him to get them to dialogue with him a little bit. And I thought of this commercial that, I wish I could find the commercial, but I couldn't find it this week on YouTube or something. And I don't even remember what it was advertising, so it probably wasn't that great of a commercial. But I remember this commercial a few years ago where like a mom's with like 3 or 4 like really crazy kids, and she walks outside the door for a second and they just start going wild in the house. So they're like breaking pots and lamps and stuff. And she walks back in, and this kid's standing there, and there's like crayon all over the walls. And he's standing there with a handful of crayons, and there's like crayon markings all over him and stuff. And she looks at him and she's like, hey, did you do this? And he just sits there and looks her in the eye and says, no. And that's kind of the way it is when we want to run from God, and the way it was when God's asking Adam and Eve what they did, because I mean, he knows what they did. It's sitting there like obvious, like the kid's standing there with crayons in his hands. Like, how's he going to convince his mom that it was his sister that did it? And so here's the thing, like, we're exactly like Adam and Eve, and God already knows when we sin. And so we don't need to be afraid of him, we don't need to run from him. So I think you guys are going into small groups next, so I'm going to pray real quick, and we'll let you guys go. God, thank you for sending Jesus to